Joy to see everybody back here for this wonderful lecture series. My name is Paul Marty. I'm a professor in the School of Information and Associate Vice Provost for Academic Innovation, but most importantly, I'm the MC for this Carothers lecture series. This series has been going on for a long time now. If you don't know anything about this series, there's a little history of the series that I've written on the page here. It's worth reading. This is the longest running interdisciplinary faculty lecture series at Florida State University, so it is a real joy. Those of you that have heard me talk in other venues know that I am a huge fan of interdisciplinarity, and I believe that innovation happens at the liminal boundaries between disciplines, and any opportunities that we have to get our faculty and our staff out of our departments, out of our disciplines, into places where we're going to rub shoulders with people that we don't normally see. That's where innovation happens. So thank you so much for being here. Many thanks, as always, to our sponsors for this series, the Office of Faculty Development and Advancement, the Office of Research, and the University Libraries for generously being our host. This series is also coordinated by an interdisciplinary committee of faculty who make suggestions for speakers. A few of them are in the room as well, so thank you so much for all of your help there. I am very excited to introduce our speaker for today. Amy A. was going to do the introductions, but she unfortunately was unable to appear at the last minute, so I'm just going to briefly introduce the speaker. I know I will not be as good as Amy would have been, but I'm delighted to have Dr. Sabrina Dickey speaking with us today. Sabrina is a nurse scientist who's dedicated to her research to health disparities within the Black population. She has a background in nursing education and family relations, and she's going to be talking to us today about her research into resiliency post-Hurricane Michael. We were just talking about how this is quite a quiet hurricane season so far for us today. Everybody knocks wood, right? But we are now years after Hurricane Michael devastated the Gulf Coast, and it is frightening how the residents of that area really still suffer after that terrible storm. And in Sabrina's work, the research has really found that the trauma and the psychosocial issues following the hurricane have caused a lot of trouble, and we're going to hear about that today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Dickey. Please welcome her for me. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Woo. Cheers.
Well, thank you. I am so pleased to be here, and some of you may be wondering, well, you're a nurse. Doing research on when we start looking at natural disasters. Well, when you think about nursing, a lot of what we do as nurses, we treat people, and so with treating not only the physical body, but also we have to think about what type of trauma have individuals experienced. And so some of that trauma, it has to do with your own mental health. And so with looking at what they've been through, what individuals have encountered, we're into natural disasters, and I have to give all the credit to Amy I, because she is the one that really said, hey, would you be interested? I think we partnered when we were doing the collaborative collisions. I think that's how we met, and she reached out and said, hey, would you be interested? I said, well, yes, I think this would really be able to weave into my body of research. And so with this, I was just so grateful and thankful to get into this work that really looks at what happens for individuals that experience this type of trauma. How do they go through it? How it affects not only themselves, their communities, but also the individuals that surround them. And so with coming up, we are right in the throes of hurricane season. Just like Paul was saying, we're just gonna kind of keep that quiet, because usually around this time we've had some type of warning, we've had some type of activity, but it's been very quiet. But we cannot forget what has happened in the past, because some of that is still having an adverse impact on the individuals that actually went through it. So just taking a look at resilience, and also looking to see, what can be done regarding those factors that might prepare us better to get through those natural disasters that do occur. So moving forward, I have new conflicts of interest, and these are the co-authors that were on this paper. With Amy and I, we have no conflicts, and the funded research was by Fosbeck Foundation for Research, co-author Amy I. She's the one that had this wonderful grant. Now, this is what we're going to be looking at resilience in communities, and what could potentially be some of those factors that help build that resilience among individuals. So let's just take a walk back in time to what happened with Hurricane Michael. Some of you may have been here, some of you may have just heard about it, but let's just envision what this was like. This was a Category 5. What we've experienced here, I think, As of lately, it might have gotten up to maybe a category 2 or 3, but nothing like a category 5. Being in the throes of this, thinking about what's going to happen to yourself, what about even your family, your pets, if you have a business, but just thinking about that. Let's just take a look back and see, can you imagine this? So that was just a glimpse, just to get you in the mindset, what it was like to go through a Category 5 hurricane, and thinking about resilience. How am I going to pick up the pieces after you've gone through this very traumatic incident, this very traumatic natural hazard? So just taking a look back, we're coming up on the anniversary of Hurricane Michael. It hit landfall October 10th. And it started around October 7th, but October 10th is when it hit, 2018. The damage that it was done, billions of dollars. You can see some of the images that were depicted, and that's not all of the images, that's just a quick snapshot. Hopes, dreams, aspirations, life savings of individuals swept away in a matter of days. And thinking about what can that do to you mentally as a person? This is what you're banking on. How do you come back from that? And not just the physical loss of, say, a business, your home, but the deaths that occurred, the human loss that occurred due to Hurricane Michael. And so with looking at this, it has impacted individuals, again, not just here in Florida, but elsewhere, because they're having to come to family members, coming to the aid, the volunteers that were there on the ground. We cannot forget about the volunteers that were so essential, what they had to encounter and what they witnessed going through the aftermath of Hurricane Michael. And that's one of the other parts of work that we do. We look at the volunteers because what they encounter, if you're not trained for that and you don't go through it day after day, with nursing, it's nothing to see, a wound, an injury, encounter individuals that have had hard times. But if you're a volunteer and you're new to this, again, that's going to have an impact on your mental psyche. And so again, the resilience factor for them is also another piece that we also look at and we have to be cognizant of. So just a little bit of a clarification. You may have heard these terminology. I just want to clarify. You may hear the terms. You've heard of natural hazard, natural disaster. No one really, saying, okay, well, hurricane, but then you hear, well, what's a natural disaster, natural hurricane? Well, when you think of natural hazard, that is what could potentially happen. So we have, say, a potential fire that could be a hazard if it gets out of control. We have some rising water that could potentially be a hazard and cause a lot of damage. That's a natural hazard. When it actually occurs, that is when you have your natural disaster. What we see of hurricanes and the floodings and the fires that have occurred, say in California and elsewhere. So just wanted to clarify that a little bit. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Just stop me. I love to engage with you. I get kind of lonely talking here by myself. So. Okay, so just looking at the aftermath of natural disasters, these are some of the things that we were looking at, the things that we noticed within the community. First and foremost, we all know, where are we going to live? We have the shelters that were available for the residents that were there in Dade County, but they're thinking, how am I going to pick up afterwards? Is housing going to be provided to me? And then it disrupted the educational aspirations of not only, say, our little ones, the children, but those that were seeking post-secondary education. How are they going to finish their degrees? How is this going to impact their career trajectory? Because they were supposed to graduate, and with this degree, they could go on and have this wonderful job. Now they're starting from scratch. They don't have a Blazer to interview with. They don't have a car to drive to their interview. They have no means of actually continuing their education. How are they supposed to transfer when they have no car or anywhere to transfer to? So all of these things we were looking at, and we found these were issues amongst the residents of Dade County they were looking at. And one very important one that we found, home ownership. And you might be thinking, well, why would home ownership be a reason for a cause amongst these individuals? And I have to ask, why do you think home ownership might have been an issue for some of these residents?
Did some of them not have insurance because of where they're at?
Okay, some might not have insurance for where they're at. Forgive me, I'm switching to that teaching mode. I'm asking questions.
No proof of ownership.
Say that again?
No proof of ownership as we've seen us post-Katrina.
I love it. No proof of ownership. This is what we found amongst a lot of residents. No proof of ownership. The house was passed down to Meemaw, or Pawpaw, or grandfather. Nobody decided, hey, let me go and see about getting the house put in an individual's name. So guess what happened? When contractors came in or either help was sent in for these individuals, they had no proof of ownership that they even had a house. So how can they actually get the resources, or how can they even start over to say that they had a house that they owned? Nobody bothered to do that. So we saw a lot of that, and these individuals, they were heartbroken. Again, everything is gone. Now everything really is gone because now no one can prove that they actually owned a home. So these were some of the issues. Again, looking at the resources, mental health, the medications, all of these things that we have to think about in the aftermath, and we know about this. So then we start thinking, well, how can these individuals get back on their feet? Let's look at resilience. What is really at the core of resilience? Okay? And we can see here, did they face stress? Absolutely. Trauma, adversity, all of these things are occurring around Hurricane Michael and anything else that they might have already been going through. We don't know the situation, especially if you have individuals that might have been living in situations where they're living paycheck to paycheck. We don't know what type of trauma they've already experienced, or either lower income housing that they were depending on. It's gone. What are they going to come back to? The resilience that they had might have been at an all-time low, and this is putting them over the tipping point. So we have to go back and look, how we define resilience, and with Hurricane Michael and any of the other natural disasters, it checks all the boxes of what we look at for resilience. So again, when we look at to finding resilience, one thing we have to pay attention to is that resilience is always going to be changing, and it changes based on what's going on with those individuals. Because if you have, say, an economic stress, your resilience, it might be a little bit different from someone that has some type of a mental health or either just a health issue in general. Okay. If you have, say, cancer, and maybe this is your second time of going through cancer, your resilience may be different from someone that is going through an economic trauma. So looking at that and how it changes is going to help us understand how we go through, how we help individuals realize that they can get through this and what they also need to rely on. And so with resilience, another way that we can look at this is by thinking about what they have to go through and really what helps to build it. Was Hurricane Michael and any other of the hurricanes that occurred, was it a challenge? Oh my goodness, absolutely. That's a challenge like none that I would ever want to go through or anybody else to experience. Control. Did they have any control over that situation? You don't. You have no control over that situation. But having control over situations and having the challenge, that potentially is going to have an impact on how resilient you are. The more control you have over a situation, that helps to give you that fortitude and that foundation to say that I can go through this. But depending on how much control you have over a situation, that can let those reserves of your resilience kind of teeter down lower than you would like it to be. So if you don't have that control over where is your next paycheck going to come from, how are you going to feed your children? How are you going to get this medication for your mother that's going through cancer treatment, or your father? Not having that control has a huge impact on our resilience. And trying to meet those challenges has a huge impact on resiliency. And then how committed are you? What is the commitment that's there? Are you willing to forge through this? Or maybe you need that assistance. And what is the commitment, say, from others that are around you to helping you get through these difficult situations? Again, when we start thinking about Hurricane Michael, there's a huge outpouring of assistance. We had volunteers that came in. We had FEMA, you have Red Cross that came in, and they were there for long periods of time, as long as they could be, and then it kind of just slips away. And so then the individuals have to start relying on themselves and also the community that they're in. And what we found is organizations within the community, those were the ones that helped to build that commitment and help strengthen that commitment and help them get back that control and also allow them to get over that challenge. And what is we'll be talking about this a little bit later on, but what is one of the key organizations in the community when you're going through a natural disaster and with resilience that was found to have a significant impact on how these individuals recovered? Yes? Library, I love that. That's good. You're still familiar. I know I've seen you before. Okay. Library. Okay. Another.
Places of worship.
I love it. Places of worship. Okay. Faith-based organizations. What we found in our research when we started talking to individuals, faith-based organizations were really the ones that helped get the individuals that good sense of control, the commitment, and challenge. But then what do you do if that is not something that aligns with you? Maybe you're agnostic, maybe you're an atheist. What do you do? Still, faith-based organizations can be a prominent source of providing food, providing just the manpower to say, hey, if this is what you need information on how to rebuild, how to access FEMA, we're going to have an informational session. This is where we're going to be meeting. So it's not that you have to ascribe to their ideologies, but they still provided that information to those individuals. So when we examine resilience, and we're looking at how are we going to get through this, how can we help individuals that have gone through such a traumatic experience, and Hurricane Michael was definitely a traumatic experience. Really, there are 4 areas that we have to look at, and I kind of touched on these. What was going on beforehand? That pre-adversity, that baseline, what individuals were experiencing. Because that really also is going to depend on how much support, how they're going to meet the challenge, and how much control that they have. If you had individuals that were tended to be, say, in higher income, socioeconomic status, their baseline or pre-adversity functioning, that might have been at a higher level as opposed to someone, again, that might be living in sponsored housing, that might have been on some type of assistance program. And so thinking about how we tailor those needs is essential. And then we start looking at the actual event, the circumstances, how much damage occurred. Do you have a home to go back to? Did you have a loss of life? Are you physically okay? What are the needs of you and your community? And then afterwards, we start looking after it has occurred, how resilient are you? You yourself might need some type of counseling. Your family, what type of help is out there? And then what are those predictors? What is going to determine, again, how you respond to a natural disaster such as Hurricane Michael? Now, when we start looking at baseline or pre-adversity functioning, these are some of the concepts that we can think about when we start looking at resilience, that flexibility. How prepared are you? And I know we've heard this again, for being prepared, disaster preparedness, be prepared for hurricanes, getting your disaster kit ready, knowing what you're going to do, having that plan of action. We can't stress this enough, because with resilience, making sure that you have what you need beforehand can actually set the bar high for being able to recuperate afterwards. But unfortunately, in this situation, a lot of the communities that we interviewed, disaster plan. What is that? I'm just listening to hear what I need to evacuate. And hopefully, I'll be able to evacuate. But what we did find a lot of is that individuals who weren't going to evacuate too. I lived here my entire life, and so does my family. I don't have the funds to go stay in a hotel or to travel across state lines. So what am I supposed to do? And so then we start looking at the resources, looking at the shelters that are available, making sure that they are aware of where they can go, because some shelters, maybe they need oxygen. They have someone that has oxygen. Maybe they have pets. And knowing what shelters provide that type of care, that's the type of information that we found that a lot of the participants, they had no idea about. They didn't know it existed. They didn't know where to turn. So we're starting out with that resilience level a little bit low, okay? And so we have to be prepared, we have to be flexible, but that optimism, that is also very key. Having that sense of hope. And for those that do go to faith-based organizations and that may be religious or spiritual, having that faith that we're going to get through this were some of the factors that we found that helped guide them through this traumatic experience that they went through. And the leadership, who are they turning to? They're looking at their community leaders. Who is in charge? Do they trust that person? Making sure that they have that good relationship and they trust that person to guide them and advise them what is going to be the best for them. And in some instances, it was a high school principal, it was someone in a faith-based organization, or either it was the actual person in their neighborhood, Mr. Jones, that has been there for 30 or 40 years, that's advising and telling everyone. So looking for those gatekeepers was also very essential. They were telling us a lot about how, okay, well, I didn't know how to do this, but I went down the street and I spoke to Mr. Jones, and he was able to inform us of what we needed to do. So that was our baseline. Now, we're looking at what's going on, okay? We're looking at the aftermath of it. We're looking at that damage, and as you saw from the pictures, video, extensive damage, billions of dollars. How are we coming back from that? And that goes along with any other type of natural disaster, so not just Hurricane Michael, but we're still hearing about all of the others. Hurricane Katrina, I don't think we'll ever get, we're never getting over any of them, but Hurricane Katrina. And we're coming up on the anniversary of that also. We're learning about that with these stories that are circulating. Individuals that were wading through water where you didn't know there were power lines or alligators. There were bodies floating around. So you were also dealing with sickness, the trauma of seeing that. And then you had the physical crimes that were occurring. Okay? So in the aftermath of these natural disasters, even though you have individuals that are still reeling and they're trying to get back on your feet, you have other individuals that were taking advantage of this vulnerable situation that were causing even more trauma. And that's trauma in the aftermath of something that's already been something that we don't want anyone to experience. And so with looking at all of these natural disasters, and we were talking and trying to figure out, how do we come back? How do we really look at this? We went back and looked at this after it had happened. It's been about 4 or 5 years. We went back to talk to the individuals in the neighborhood and thought, the survey is just not going to do it its justice. We have to get into with the communities, talk with the people, do the interviews, the focus groups, and they opened up beautifully for us. And so those are the type of mechanisms that we wanted to use to make sure we were getting the real story of what occurred. And so with the post-adversity adjustment, what we found, again, shelter. How am I supposed to find someplace that's going to be safe for myself and my family? A huge one that the individuals looked at. And it's still going on. Still looking at blue tarps, still looking at construction. If you still go over to the county, still. Things are not back as they were. The infrastructure was damaged because, again, the amount of money. And then you had some individuals that said, I've left, I'm not coming back. It was too painful, it was too traumatic for them to even think about proceeding. But again, having access to those other things. How can I get my treatments? How can I get my medications? If you have medications that needed to be refrigerated, there's no power, there's no electricity. Let's hope those ice packs last as long as they can. How effective is the medication going to be? So adjusting to this new life was a huge, huge point of contention to where some individuals just said, I'm done. I'm not coming back. I left, or either while they were there and trying to navigate where do they go to get their resources? I don't know how to fill the paperwork out. I don't know how to talk to these individuals. We had a lot of older individuals that we talked to that were survivors from Hurricane Michael, and for them it was just too cumbersome. And they said, I'm leaving, I'm gonna go and live with my children. I'm not coming back. I don't see how I'm gonna be able to fill out this paperwork. It was very confusing. And they didn't come back. And so with looking at this, afterwards with Hurricane Michael, these are the things that we were asking the individuals, just wholeheartedly, how are you recovering? How's the community changed? What was it like afterwards? And with many of them, they had a sense of togetherness. This was something that really bonded them. For those that actually did stay, they felt bonded. They felt as though if I can get through this, there's nothing that's going to scare me, and there's nothing that I can't handle. So having a sense of community, we found it was very much heightened amongst these individuals. And their resilience, it actually increased exponentially, because they felt that this was a bonding experience that brought them together. They were helping each other, whereas some individuals, they didn't know their neighbors, or they didn't know them very well, or they knew them now. Or they're meeting different people. They had no idea. The resources, they were sharing and really come together as one. And so they really felt that this had, I hate to say, but a positive impact on the community when you think of a sense of community, not the physical damage, but just that sense of community, the camaraderie. They really felt that this was something that helped their community grow together and bond. And so when we think of resilience, social support, having someone to rely on, whenever we're going through these traumatic experiences, so whether it's Hurricane Michael, Katrina, we remember the HIV/AIDS epidemic, 9/11, okay? All of these things we remember. Social support and having those ties, those are the things that stuck out as, we're going to get you through. This is how we're going to build resilience amongst our people in the communities. Being able to go and talk to individuals, we live in such a digital age now. We do a lot of texting. I'm pretty old. I say I'm pretty old school. I think I'm old school. I like to call people. I like to talk to people on the phone. I hear your voice. I can tell how you're feeling. I can look, and even better yet, I like to even see you. That's even better. So I can see, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? I'm looking at body movements. That's just me. I would say that's the nurse coming out of me, but I think I'm just probably a nosy person. But I people watch. But I like to be in the company of people so I can make sure we're clear in our interaction. I know how you're feeling, how you're thinking, what's going on with you. And so having that social support and those ties with the community was so essential. Okay? Again, when we think of things like the HIV and AIDS epidemic, having that social support, when HIV and AIDS, and I know I'm kind of veering off, but just thinking about when HIV and AIDS came out, there was a lot of stigma that was involved. People were ostracized, and there wasn't a lot of social support that occurred. But now, our research has grown, and we have just come exponentially with how we view social support and the importance of it. So it doesn't just reside, say, in our natural disasters, but with everyone. That sense of having that tie and that social support to help build that resilience, that is really what's going to help our individuals. So if you're not a family member, if you're that volunteer, if you are from that Red Cross organization, if you are from, say, FEMA or a faith-based organization or any other organization, or just a job, having social support so individuals know that they're not in this alone made a difference. That's one of the key things that we found. Take a peek at the time. Okay. I'll be finished in just a second. So one of the things that we found, again, with looking at how individuals cope and what got them through, religion was one of those key factors. A key factor. Looking at faith-based organizations, that was something that helped get them through that period of time where they were at their darkest. And it didn't matter what type of religion that they were in. Resounding number of our participants indicated that it was the faith-based organizations, being in a religious organization, helped get them through. But again, that doesn't mean that this is only for those that ascribe to, say, a religion or a spirituality. Because those faith-based organizations, they welcomed all. No one was excluded. And so what we looked at with our population, we did a quick look at the ages. We didn't gather too much information because we wanted them to be comfortable with sharing what they had gone through. So we really kept it at a minimum of what we were gathering as far as personal information. So we really just looked at the affiliation, their level of education. We did focus groups, and then we coded everything. And then we worked independently, and then we came together, we analyzed our codes, and we developed our themes from that. So first we worked independently to establish what are the codes that we saw from the data that we gathered, and then we put it together as one to develop those themes. And so what we found, again, is looking at this, is that there was a lot of growth, post-traumatic growth occurred after this. Individuals had strengths that they didn't realize that they had before that natural disaster. And so that's something that we always, you keep in the back of your mind. When you go through something, you don't realize how strong you are a lot of times until you actually go through it. It's just like sometimes, I think of I'm a parent. And so I look at the younger parents with the little babies and the toddlers, and I look at them carrying around their diaper bags, and I'm thinking, my gosh, that's just so much. And they're pushing their strollers, and you don't realize what you're going through, because now I look at it, my gosh, there's no way I'm going back to that, no way. But you don't realize how hectic it might be, or even with being in school, even working on a job, you're working on a project. You don't realize what you were juggling, what you were doing, everything that went around to get this completed until after you finished. And that's really what we found. There was a lot of growth amongst these individuals after the hurricane occurred. But then we also did see a lot of mental health issues. And this is where that pre-adversity period came from. Because with talking with them, it sounded like these mental health issues were just under the surface. But then when you have a traumatic event like this natural disaster, then that's when you see everything come into view. They were holding it all together, but then with this trauma, they couldn't hold it together anymore. And there were a lot of mental health issues. When they started with schools again, the parents were complaining, the teachers were really seeing issues with the children's behaviors. They were acting out. There was a lot of violence. They weren't completing their schoolwork. They had a lot of issues. And so this trauma that they were going through, they really saw the mental health issues in the children, but also the adults. When you think about the magnitude of stress that they were also going through, so it's not just themselves. You know, you're thinking about providing that shelter, some type of normalcy for your children and your family members. You also have to contend with how am I going to keep my child on track with their educational level. All of that. So again, the mental health issue was something that they repeatedly indicated was something that was really coming to the forefront. But again, it was just right under the surface, and the trauma exposed it. So what do we see from this? There's not a lot of literature with looking back at, say, long term. And when I say that, I mean going back into the community after it's happened. And that's really what we wanted to do, because when we were looking and thinking about this, Amy came to me and said, hey, you know, we're going back there. We want to see what's happened. Why doesn't anybody ever go back, say, 4 or 5 years, 10 years? Let's go back into the community. And that's what we did. She went back in to find out, how are individuals recovering? Is this still an issue? How are you surviving? And again, that resounding theme of resilience, having community bonds that were formed from this, being prepared, home ownership, knowing the importance of that. There was a lot that was learned after the fact, and a lot of individuals just said, oh my gosh, I just knew this. If someone had just told me, but we were able to provide them that information, they were able to learn from this. But again, it's just knowing that resilience, it's not just one thing, it's multiple factors that are going to add to this. And so when you're thinking about working with anyone, if you're going to do disaster work, thinking about what has occurred to them, that pre-disaster event that might be setting the stage for their resilience, and thinking, how can I get them through this? Because it's not just this natural disaster that's occurred. It's what else was going on in their life that might make this even more of a trauma than it already is. Okay. And again, with using religion, that was something that our participants said it really was able to get them through, having that sense of faith, having that sense of hope, but also being able to open up to individuals that weren't even having any sense of religion or spirituality, and being able to say, it's okay, we're going to get through this together, and these are the resources that are there for you. That's what it was about. References. And this has been such a pleasure. I'm open to any questions. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, have you looked at, and if so, what kind of findings have you had about, since Michael, what are some of the things that have happened in the community to build their resilience for the next time?
So with building resilience, one of the things that they have talked about was that they need a council. They said that the people themselves, they bonded through this community experience. They really wanted to be involved in what's going on in their local governments. They really wanted to have a say-so because they felt that, hey, you know, we were asking a little bit, you know, too much for these particular types of resources. We want to have someone that's in the know of what is occurring with the government, how you're going to be able to, and this is the local government, how you're going to be able to provide for us, what you're going to be able to do. And so with that, that actually sets the stage up, you know. We have a stakeholder that's going to be on our side that can advise us on how we need to, say, if another hurricane or natural disaster comes, what we need to do and how we can locate our resources. But it was really the churches for the individuals in the study. They were the one that really led the charge, and the participants really were going back to, if it wasn't for them, and then other local organizations. The Urban League was another huge organization in Bay County that really assisted the participants in our study. But having a community council, having someone that's a stakeholder to be able to be involved in the local government, that was one of the things that they really, really wanted to push for. Yes?
I'm sure a lot of people remember, as I do, the pictures of Mexico Beach the day or the week after, and the reporting which suggested that this town had been obliterated. And the question, how much of that has come back in terms of businesses and housing? There were even predictions that this town is gone, you know. But you're suggesting, I think, that it has come back significantly. Do you have any data on that?
Well, not that it's come back significantly. When I say that, I'm talking about the resilience as far as individuals having a sense of hope. There is still, if you go, you're still going to see the destruction. You're going to see where buildings once were. You're going to see, in some instances, still tarps that are covering areas. There's by no means where everything has been built back. No, not at all. What I was really referring to is the sense of community. And some individuals left, they were saying, I'm done. I can't do this. There was just really too much destruction, and it was massive. So there's a very, very long way to go. We're looking at billions of dollars that were done, where individuals really had that sense of, I'm coming back. I'm coming back from this as far as a sense of resilience. I've gotten through this. I don't have any family members that I can go out of state to, or maybe within state. So I've got to find my best way to get through this. But Mexico, oh my goodness, the destruction that was there was massive. And it's still, it's not built back by any means.
Are there stores back? Is there commerce going?
Oh, absolutely. There is commerce there, but it's not the flourishing where it once was by any means. But you can still see, yes, there are stores there. You can see the traffic there. It's been a very, very slow process of them building it back. But there's hope. There's hope. But there still is. There's stores and everything there. Yes.
This was really fun. Thank you for, a challenging topic, but thank you for bringing this this lens to us. I was thinking about this from an interdisciplinary space in this conference discussion space too, in part because I've thought about natural disasters more from the sociology lens, including folks who've looked at urban challenges and responses to heat waves. Like there's some famous studies of what happens when people are socially isolated in apartment buildings, for example, and then you're thinking about topics like age and gender and older men especially, who may be less likely to be participating in faith-based organizations or to have neighbors and friends and other folks who are caring for them and checking in on them. They're more likely to die. They're more likely to just have longer lasting health effects. So I'm thinking about it from that lens around structural next step directions, or what kinds of data or questions you would think about next. And I have some personal connections too for thinking about the ways that my father and others managed the health disruptions from COVID when they were isolated in apartments, and then my family in Puerto Rico has very similar patterns in terms of when you have family homes that are passed back and forth that don't have deeds. There's all sorts of disruptions that also happen to the healthcare infrastructure as well, where you might have really lagged outcomes for a while in terms of the cardiac stress and other things that happen. So I'm wondering to what extent the data that you covered so far, that you have so far been able to analyze, or what you would think about doing next, or that others who are interested in these topics might think about next. How would you think about that kind of policy and structural directions for embedding further resilience? It seemed like some of those folks were engaged in local government now, those that had stayed, but what were you seeing so far, or what do you want to leave us with in terms of thinking about social structure and policy?
So, that's an excellent question, an excellent point. So with looking at what we want to do, we are really talking about going back into the community and going back to those organizations. Like I was telling you, the Urban League was very, very instrumental, and really focusing on those organizations and how it impacted them, what they felt that could have been done differently, and how they are still being able to assist individuals that are having any type of trauma from a hurricane, but looking to see, what was your organization like beforehand? What is it like now in the aftermath of Hurricane Michael? What have you implemented since then, so that if something does happen like this, you can move forward and say, we now have a plan. We know what has worked and what has not worked. The other aspect that we're really looking at, again, is the volunteers. Looking at the trauma and also looking at the post-traumatic growth, potentially being something that has happened not only from our participants, but also from the volunteers. Again, with the volunteers, you don't know what you're going into. You don't know what you're going to experience, and if you are not prepared for that, that could be very, very traumatizing for individuals. So we've written, I think we published one or two papers on that volunteer, what it's like, what was it like for them. So we're really starting to angle now towards, okay, we looked at what happened, we went back and followed up after it happened, but now, what about the organizations that were involved? What is it that they can do? And we were trying to see, hey, can we potentially hold maybe a town meeting? Get some of those original participants along with those organizations that were so instrumental with helping get the resources established for them when they were going through the recovery period, trying to get them together to figure out, okay, what would you do differently? What is it still like, and what type of changes have you seen? What would you say are the type of policies that need to be in place, especially, again, for those people that don't have deeds? They don't have ownership, they don't have anything. So we're really trying to focus on, okay, how can we really expand this to not only our participants, but those organizations that are also helping, and also the volunteers, a huge one that we're looking at. Good question. Does that mean?
All right, during, especially Michael, a lot of the people that were thrust as involuntary volunteers, I'm gonna call them, were the librarians. Because the libraries were one of the places that people gathered. Have you done anything in terms of how did the librarian actually work with the disaster? You said volunteers and you said people affected. Granted, the librarians are also affected because they're generally living in the community, but above and beyond that, have you done any resilience studies on that?
You just gave me an idea. I'm gonna talk to Amy. Librarians, I like that.
And I'll piggyback off of that and say that Marcia Martis and the Information Institute here at FSU has done a lot of research on the role of libraries post-natural disasters as well. So there could be a research connection there in this area.
And they partnered with Ryder, which worked on
Right.
structural and civil engineering resilience issues. So you have a daisy chain of
There you go. Every possible discipline connected. I was going to ask a very quick question,
Yes.
and I know we're keeping an eye on the time, and I see there are other hands over there too. I live in Indian Head, and if you know anyone who lives in Indian Head, Myers Park, we still haven't recovered from the tornadoes from almost a year and a half ago now.
Absolutely.
And I was thinking, as you were going through your talk, every single point checked off something that the neighborhood has struggled with. And I was wondering if there was a guide to community resilience that was available. Maybe you're developing one, maybe you know one you could recommend, that communities could if we had had something like that, I think that would have let the community know what was gonna happen. This isn't gonna be a short-term fix, this is gonna be a long-term problem. I wonder if that would have helped smooth the situation over.
That is an excellent point, and I have seen community resilience. I have seen just models to help fortify community resilience, but I think what you are hitting on is so very important because we spend so much time. You gotta get prepared, you gotta get prepared, we gotta get prepared. But then we need to really prepare people mentally what this is going to be like. The tornadoes, the hurricanes, the floods, you may be out of electricity for this amount of days. You may not be able to get here. This is what you're going to experience. I think something like that, I like that too.
I think it would be very helpful, again, our neighborhood came together after the tornado, shared food, did all of these things. Now we're a year and a half out, and there's people saying, why are there still so many houses covered with blue tarps, right? What's the slowdown? Why haven't you gotten your house fixed yet, right?
Exactly.
And, yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And so just being able to put all of that information out, I think is so essential. I like that. Maybe a community resilience packet and having people, I like that. Okay, I've got to keep in mind of all of these great ideas. I think I saw these hands. Please keep that question. I think I saw these. Yes.
Yeah, so just to go along with involuntary volunteers, I used to work for the county as a librarian. I'm still a librarian now. I'm actually a librarian for nursing, so you may have seen my
Oh,
name.
tell me your name, please.
Jules Bailey.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Interesting name.
when I worked for the county, I worked for the library there, and county workers in Leon County, if something like a hurricane is coming, we're not supposed to leave. Because we can and often are called in to staff the emergency operations center. I did that during Hurricane Irma. I actually was there overnight. They have places where they have like dorm style beds where you can sleep for a few hours, but I was there on the phones overnight, and after a certain point you can't leave because the winds are too high. And there's people that get called in to work in like the shelters and direct people and do things like that. And then libraries are often one of the first places to reopen, so as soon as they can get the generator running, they'll open as a comfort shelter, be open extended hours, and you might have stuff to deal with at home, but sometimes you can't because you get called into work. So that does happen here in Leon County. It may also happen further west in the Panhandle too, I wouldn't be surprised. And I do know at least one person I used to work with at the library that cited it as a reason that she went somewhere else because she wasn't comfortable working there, knowing that she would not be able to evacuate if a bad enough hurricane was coming at us.
Really?
Yeah.
And this is really opening up I'm loving this because the library now is just really opening up to a whole nother pathway. You started it. Thank you. I love it. Thank you. That's so interesting.
I lived in Louisiana when Ida came through, which many people viewed as a failure of policy in the state and especially New Orleans because the city was without any infrastructure for over a month. And so it was an issue of not having learned from mistakes or not having the money to put in place resilient infrastructure. But I think from that you see the role of the grassroots response, and everybody knows about Cajun Navy. There can't be a disaster around the world without World Central Kitchen responding now. I feel like a lot of that has come from people seeing the defects in policy and physical infrastructure. And so I think it is really interesting to hone in on the volunteer organizations and those who have put in place incredible systems to be able to respond literally anywhere in the world in some cases. So I think studying some of those where they've built a network
Absolutely.
could be really powerful.
Thank you. We've got to stop being reactive and being proactive. That's what it all boils down to. We have to be proactive, and I like that community resilience. And then you had a question.
Oh, yes, thank you, if I may. My question was, tapping into another dimension which connects with a few of these points, which was about the role of technology mediation. For example, if you want to create or curate a community resource, there could be publication websites or, similar avenues. So, there is a dimension of technology augmenting resilience pathways. and also technology enabling certain, resilient support structures. So I was wondering if these are dimensions that have emerged or, could connect with some of these sort of future dimensions.
We have not looked at that pathway, but I'm sure that is something that really could provide a lot of great information. My only concern, and technology is wonderful, where you can scan things with a QR code, that could potentially work. My only issue is that all of this would have to be in place beforehand. And being able to scan this for that community resilience, scan this for preparedness, what you need to do, but implementing, say, a website specifically with that, I think that would be a wonderful idea. Goodness, I like that.
Well, this is a fantastic conversation. I know we're at, we got one more. Okay, come on.
Tisha Holmes in the Department of Urban Regional Planning studies exactly what she, I don't know what your name was just talking about. So another, nice to meet you too, another potential collaboration opportunity called Tisha Holmes for this kind of work.
Spectacular. And those are the kind of interdisciplinary connections that we're so delighted to see happening at this. So please join me in thanking Sabrina for this spectacular. And on behalf of the Carothers Lecture Steering Committee, I'm delighted to present you with this souvenir mug from the Carothers Lecture Series, which comes with a gift card in it to Cowan's Coffee Shop as a nod to the historical roots of this series. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. Thank you so much, Sabrina, for this fantastic talk. And we will see you next month for the next one, which is part of the FSU Discovery Days. Yay! Thank you all. See you soon.